Life has a way of catching you off guard, no matter how old you get. I always thought there would come a day when everything would fall into place, a calm, simple routine without the drama and wild dreams of being young. But maybe life doesn't work that way. Maybe there are moments that shake us up, making us question everything we thought we knew about ourselves. My name is Ellen, and I'm 63 years old. After working as a school principal for decades and raising two wonderful kids, I thought I had myself all figured out. My husband passed away 5 years ago. Since then, I've built a quiet life filled with peaceful habits, morning walks, working in my garden, and staying close to family. I believed I had left behind all the excitement and surprises of my younger days. But recently, something changed in ways I still can't fully explain. It started so quietly that I barely noticed it at first, a look that lasted too long, a silent moment, a connection that seemed innocent until it wasn't. My son Alex has a friend named Colin who has been part of our family for years. He was like another son to me, someone I had always trusted completely. But something shifted between us in just one day. There was a tension in the air that felt odd, like something important that neither of us knew how to talk about. Looking back now, it's amazing how a lifetime of feeling secure and confident could suddenly feel so shaky and full of doubt. It leaves me wondering what really happened that day and why I'm still thinking about it. This is my story. A life of simple pleasures. My life isn't extraordinary, but it's good. I like it that way. After more than 30 years running a school, I retired planning to finally enjoy some peaceful time with my husband Robert. He died 5 years ago. He was a kind, caring man, and even though we sometimes disagreed, we loved each other deeply. Losing him was heartbreaking, but I found comfort in daily routines and strong bonds with our children, especially my son Alex. Alex is 35, reliable just like his father was. He works as an engineer, and his calm, determined nature reminds me so much of Robert. Colin is thoughtful and polite, with a quiet, reflective personality that puts people at ease. I've always felt lucky to watch Alex and Colin stay such close friends over the years. Colin's visits bring a different kind of energy to the house, a steady calmness that I really appreciate. The day everything changed. After finishing some work in my garden, I decided to treat myself to a cup of tea and a relaxing afternoon at home. Alex was away on a business trip, and the house was perfectly quiet. Just as I was about to sit down in my favorite chair, I heard someone knocking at the door. "Colin, what a lovely surprise," I said, genuinely happy to see him. "If you're not too busy, please come in and stay for some tea." He paused for a moment, then smiled. "I'd really like that. It's been too long since we've had a chance to talk." We settled into the living room, and for the first few minutes, our conversation was light and easy. We talked about work, family, and life in general. But something about the atmosphere felt different. Maybe it was the quietness of the empty house or the relaxed mood of our chat, but I started feeling unusually comfortable around him. As I handed him his teacup, our fingers touched briefly. He quickly pulled his hand back, giving me a shy smile, and there was an awkward moment where neither of us knew what to say. It was such a small thing, just our hands touching for a second, but something changed in that brief moment. I felt a warmth and awareness between us that I hadn't expected, a connection that went beyond simple friendship. I tried to brush it off as my imagination, telling myself it was just a passing moment caused by the quiet afternoon. But as we kept talking, I found myself paying more attention to his presence, noticing little things like the way he leaned forward when I spoke, his soft laughter, the warmth in his eyes. It felt like an invisible line had been drawn between us, something that neither of us mentioned but both of us could feel. By the time Colin left, I was left with a strange feeling and a new awareness of him that hadn't been there before. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nothing, but the memory stayed with me, leaving me with an odd mix of excitement and confusion. The memory that wouldn't fade. In the days that followed, I couldn't quite forget that afternoon with Colin. Despite trying to dismiss it as just a simple conversation, the memory of his touch, his gaze, and the quiet intensity in his eyes stayed with me. I felt silly for even thinking about it, for letting my mind wander to unfamiliar places. Colin was like family, someone I'd watched grow from a college student into a successful professional. But I couldn't deny the small thrill I'd felt in his presence, the sense of warmth and comfort that had stayed with me long after he left. I found myself wondering if he'd felt it too, or if it was just my imagination, a passing feeling brought on by loneliness and memories of the past. I kept telling myself I was overthinking it, but the feeling lingered like an unanswered question in the back of my mind. Growing closer. A week later, Colin stopped by again, this time to return a book he'd borrowed. He seemed relaxed, and I invited him to sit for a while, feeling that same warmth I'd experienced before. We talked easily, our conversation flowing from light topics to more personal ones. He told me about his career, his thoughts about the future, and the challenges he was facing. As he spoke, I felt a sense of pride, like a mother watching her child grow into adulthood. But there was something else too, a growing awareness of the way he looked at me, the attention in his gaze, and the unspoken connection that felt both natural and unsettling. Our conversations became more personal, and with each visit, I felt the unspoken tension growing. It was subtle, a quiet understanding that neither of us acknowledged but both felt. I tried to convince myself it was nothing more than friendship, but deep down I knew there was something more, a feeling I hadn't expected and didn't quite know how to handle. Over the next few weeks, Colin's visits became more frequent. Each time he stopped by, I felt a mix of excitement and guilt. I loved his company and looked forward to our talks and the warmth and understanding he brought into my life. But I was also becoming more worried. There was a quiet fear that I was going too far, allowing myself to develop feelings that weren't right for our relationship. A moment of truth. One evening, as we sat in the living room looking through an old family photo album, I realized just how much I'd come to enjoy his presence. We laughed over memories and shared stories, and for a moment, I felt a sense of companionship I hadn't felt in years. But as he leaned in to look at a photo, his arm brushed against mine, and I felt my heart race. It was such a small thing, barely a touch, but the closeness and the warmth of his skin sent a thrill through me that I couldn't ignore. I looked at him, our eyes meeting, and for a brief second I felt a connection that went beyond friendship. A quiet, unspoken bond that left me both excited and terrified. I knew I had to stop this, to distance myself before things went any further. Yet each time I tried to convince myself to end our meetings, I felt a sharp pang of regret, a longing for the comfort and warmth he brought to my life. I couldn't deny the loneliness I'd felt since Robert's passing, the quiet ache that had become part of my daily existence. Colin's presence filled that empty space and brought a sense of companionship and understanding that I hadn't realized I needed. And though I knew my feelings were inappropriate, I couldn't bring myself to let go and close the door on the one connection that made me feel alive. Oh, the confession. One evening, with Alex still out of town, Colin came by to drop off some groceries he'd picked up for me. I invited him to stay for dinner. Our conversation was more reflective than usual. Colin shared his struggles with loneliness and the difficulties he faced in balancing his career with his personal life. I listened, feeling a deep sense of understanding and connection that went beyond words. At one point, as I was washing dishes, I felt Colin's hand on my shoulder. It was a light touch, gentle and reassuring, yet it sent a warmth through me that I couldn't ignore. I looked up, meeting his gaze, and in that moment I saw the same feelings reflected in his eyes, a quiet longing and a depth of emotion that left me speechless. "I don't know," he began, his voice gentle and almost hesitant. "How to say this, Mrs. Caldwell? I feel something between us. I'm not sure what it is, but I can't ignore it." My heart raced, a mixture of shock and panic building within me. I wanted to deny it, to dismiss it as nothing important, but I knew it would be a lie. I looked at him, seeing the vulnerability in his expression and the same uncertainty and longing that I felt. "Colin," I replied, my voice barely a whisper, "we can't do this. This isn't something we can pursue." He nodded, but his hand lingered on my shoulder, a quiet reassurance that spoke of his own confusion. We stood there in silence, both of us struggling with the weight of our emotions and the reality of the boundary we'd silently crossed. After a long moment, he stepped back, his expression filled with regret. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Caldwell. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." "You didn't." I offered him a small smile, acknowledging how complicated the situation had become. We finished dinner in silence. The atmosphere was tense but oddly comforting. I knew that whatever had happened between us was real yet impossible. And though we said little, we both understood that some lines couldn't be crossed, no matter how tempting they might seem. Walking on thin ice. In the weeks following our conversation, Colin continued to visit, but we approached each encounter with newfound caution and politeness. We maintained a silent agreement, an unspoken understanding that we would keep our emotions in check, avoiding anything that could be misunderstood. Our visits, once filled with easy laughter and comfortable silences, became carefully planned exchanges. Each of us was very aware of the new boundary we had drawn between us, but as much as we tried, the tension was undeniable. A glance, a subtle gesture, the way our conversations sometimes drifted to quieter, more thoughtful topics, everything felt more intense. Each visit felt like walking a fine line between friendship and something unspoken. I felt as though I was holding my breath, waiting for something to shift again. I found myself wishing for the ease we once had, that uncomplicated friendship that now felt lost in the growing complexity between us. One evening, as we sat in the living room discussing a book we'd both recently read, Colin's hand brushed against mine. The touch was fleeting, a barely noticeable contact, but it sent a jolt through me, a reminder of the feelings I was trying so hard to ignore. I glanced at him, our eyes meeting in a way that felt both tender and charged with meaning. He quickly looked away, but the silence that followed was filled with an unspoken understanding that we were both struggling to maintain our resolve. As much as I tried to remind myself that this was just friendship, I had also become attached to these occasions, the warmth and companionship that Colin brought. The idea of letting that go filled me with a sense of loss that I hadn't anticipated. The struggle within. In an effort to create some distance, I started filling my days with various activities and plans. I joined a local gardening club and began taking long walks around the neighborhood to prevent my mind from drifting back to those quiet moments with Colin. However, despite my best efforts, each time he visited, the connection between us remained as strong as ever. On one Saturday, we found ourselves alone again, sharing stories and discussing a topic that had us both laughing. The moment was light, almost carefree, but there was an undercurrent of tension that neither of us could ignore. I saw it in the way his eyes lingered on me and the way his smile softened, as if he too was struggling to keep things light and ignore the bond that was growing deeper each time we met. The unspoken agreement between us began to feel fragile, as though it could break at any moment. As the weeks passed, I sensed that we were both approaching a critical point where we needed to confront the hidden emotions. There were moments when I would catch him looking at me, his expression unreadable, as though he too was questioning where this path was leading us. Each time I felt a rush of conflicting emotions, a mixture of excitement, fear, and guilt. I knew that the emotions I was experiencing were potentially dangerous, leading to consequences neither of us had prepared for. Despite the risks, I couldn't bring myself to end it and say the words that would draw a final line between us. The weight of guilt. The tension between us grew with each passing day until our meetings became a delicate balance of restraint and quiet longing. We were both holding back, aware of the boundary that neither of us was willing to cross, yet unable to let go of the connection that had brought us so close. It was a complicated, painful feeling, and I often found myself lying awake at night wondering how long we could keep up this delicate dance. How long could we ignore the emotions simmering beneath the surface? But deep down, I knew that this couldn't last. We were both playing with fire, and eventually one of us would have to pull back to make the difficult decision to let go. As much as I dreaded that moment, I knew it was coming, a reality that was becoming harder to ignore with each passing day. After several weeks of maintaining this careful balance, I began to feel the weight of guilt more heavily. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was betraying something, betraying Alex's trust, betraying my own values, and perhaps even betraying Colin by allowing myself to become emotionally attached. I was indulging in something that had no place in our lives, something that could only lead to hurt and regret. Each time I thought of ending our connection, I felt a pang of sadness and reluctance to let go of the one bond that had brought warmth and meaning to my days. But I knew I couldn't continue like this. Finding clarity. I started reflecting on my feelings, trying to understand what had led me to develop such an attachment. Perhaps it was the loneliness I'd felt since Robert passed, a quiet ache that had settled into my life without my realizing it. Colin had filled that void, bringing a sense of companionship and understanding that I hadn't known I was missing. But even as I acknowledged this, I understood that my feelings were inappropriate and that I was risking far too much for a connection that had no future. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, I decided it was time to confront my emotions and understand what I was truly looking for. I realized that my loneliness was a result of my own need for companionship, which had led me down this path. Colin had simply been the one to fill that void, to provide a sense of comfort in a way that I hadn't expected. Determined to move forward, I resolved to put some distance between us, to create a space that would allow me to let go of the feelings I had developed. It was a painful decision that left me feeling empty, but I knew it was the right choice. I couldn't continue living with this sense of guilt, this feeling that I was compromising my own values. I needed to find a way to restore my sense of self and heal the loneliness within me without relying on anyone else to do it. The goodbye. The next day, I planned to speak with Colin and gently explain that we needed to maintain some distance to preserve the boundaries of our friendship and to respect the lives we had both built. Even though it was painful, I knew this was the only way to find peace and the only way to preserve the integrity of our relationship without crossing a line that would lead to regret. As I prepared for the conversation, I felt a mix of sadness and relief, a sense of closure that allowed me to look at the situation with a clearer mind. I knew this was a necessary step, a decision that would eventually help me move forward and let go of the feelings that had consumed me. Our final conversation felt bittersweet, a quiet end to something that had brought both joy and confusion into my life. When Colin arrived that evening, I invited him in, feeling the weight of the moment and the sense that this was our goodbye. We sat in the living room, each of us conscious of the tension between us and the feelings that had been building over the past several months. I struggled to find the words to express everything I was feeling without hurting him or making things more complicated. Colin, I started, my voice gentle but steady, I've been thinking a lot about our friendship, and I believe it's best if we create some space. I've valued our relationship so much, and I don't want to lose it, but I also don't want things to become more complicated. He looked at me, his expression filled with understanding but also sadness. I understand, Mrs. Caldwell. I never meant to cause any tension or make things difficult. I felt a pang of regret and sadness that I hadn't expected. Colin, you haven't done anything wrong. It's just that I think I became too attached, and I need to take a step back to focus on finding that sense of peace within myself. He nodded softly. For a brief moment, there was silence between us, a quiet acknowledgement that our meetings were coming to an end, marking the close of a chapter that had been both meaningful and filled with unspoken emotions. "I'll miss you," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "I'll miss you too," I responded, feeling a lump form in my throat. "But this is for the best. It's what we both need." We shared a long, silent look at each other, processing the finality of the moment and the realization that this was goodbye. I felt a wave of emotions, relief, sadness, and a quiet gratitude for the connection we had shared, even if it had been brief and complex. As Colin rose to leave, he gave me a gentle hug, a warm, comforting embrace that felt like a farewell to everything we had shared. When the door closed behind him, I felt a sense of emptiness, a hollow ache that I knew would take time to heal. But I also felt a quiet strength, a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in weeks, confident that we had made the right decision and both taken a step toward preserving our lives, our values, and our integrity. Moving forward. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on our bond, the moments that had brought us close, and the emotions that had threatened to pull us apart. I realized that while our connection had been intense, it was also a reminder of the importance of boundaries and the need to protect the relationships that define us. Though I missed Colin's presence, I knew that ending things had been the right choice, a decision that would allow me to move forward with a sense of clarity and purpose. As I looked toward the future, I felt a quiet determination to find peace within myself, to heal the loneliness that had led me down this path, and to embrace the lessons I had learned. Life has a way of surprising us at any age, and sometimes those surprises force us to examine who we really are. This experience taught me that even at 63, the heart can still be stirred in unexpected ways. But it also taught me the importance of wisdom, boundaries, and the strength that comes from making difficult but necessary choices. I may have lost a special friendship, but I gained something more valuable, a deeper understanding of myself and the knowledge that I have the strength to do what's right, even when it's hard.